Hello and welcome to EZGlutenFree. Today we're going to be making that naan bread. Now naan is a pillowy, chewy Indian flatbread that's typically made in a fiery tandoor oven. But since I don't have one of these ovens in my kitchen, today we're going to be doing it the way I saw my friend Richard do it last week, right on the stovetop on a hot cast iron griddle. They're simple to make and simply delicious. We'll start out by putting together a bread flour blend that's more substantial and heavier than the fine baking flour blend I gave you earlier this year. Okay, first we'll need 1.25 cups of sweet sorghum flour. We'll need 1 cup of corn flour, or you could substitute rice flour. We'll need 3/4 cup of tapioca flour, and this will add some elasticity to the bread. And 1 teaspoon of xanthan gum. Now stir these ingredients together with a wire whisk until they're very well combined. Now this mixture will yield 3 cups of the flour blend. Depending on the humidity, the recipe calls for 2 to 2.25 cups. So remove 1 cup of the flour mix and set it aside to use as bench flour, which will help us roll these out later. Now for the remaining 2 cups, stir in 1 teaspoon of salt and 1/8 teaspoon each of both baking powder and baking soda. Now for the wet ingredients, add 3/4 cup of warm water to a bowl and stir in 1 teaspoon of yeast and 1 tablespoon of sugar to feed that yeast. Then set this aside for about 5 to 10 minutes. Once the yeast is frothy, add 3 tablespoons of plain Greek yogurt and 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Then stir to combine. Pour the wet into the dry and stir until the dough comes together. At this point I like to turn it out and knead it on my work surface for a few minutes. Now at first it'll seem like it's sticking to the table, but you can also see how easily it comes back together into the ball without me having to use any additional flour beyond the original 2 cups. If you're having trouble with this, you might need to add a little bit more flour here. Once you have a beautiful ball of dough, place it into an oiled bowl, then cover it with plastic wrap. Let it rest in a warm place for 2 to 4 hours to allow the dough to rise and allow the dough to mature a little bit. When you're ready to roll out the bread, turn it out onto a floured surface and divide the dough into 4 sections for larger ones, or 6 sections if you want these to be a little smaller. Now roll each section into a ball and return it to the oiled bowl and cover it with plastic wrap. Now take a ball of dough and roll it completely around in the bench flour to make it easier to roll out. Now on a floured surface, roll the piece of dough into an oblong shape measuring about 8 or 9 inches long by 4 to 6 inches wide and about 1/4 inch thick. At this point the dough should be fairly easy to pick up, place on the palm of your hand, and slap it down onto a preheated, very hot, ungreased cast iron griddle or skillet. Now after about 1 to 2 minutes on the first side, or just as that side begins to blacken and the top surface begins to bubble up, give it a flip and let it cook for another 1 to 2 minutes on the second side. Now remove it from the griddle, place it on a serving plate, then either brush it with melted butter or drizzle on some olive oil and sprinkle on your favorite seasonings. And I used Italian seasonings because that's just what happens sometimes when an Italian girl commandeers an Indian recipe. And before you know it, you'll have a warm, delicious stack of Indian flatbread ready to serve at your next meal. So give it a try, or let me know how you might serve them. And if you'd like to print a copy of today's recipe, you could always visit my blog in the link below. And for new recipes every week, don't forget to subscribe. See you again soon.